Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Positive Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Parmis, and I'm so glad that you're here. If you want to listen to more episodes like this one on self-improvement, mindset, and wellness, go ahead and hit that follow button to join the family. Today, I want to talk to you about something we have all wrestled with at some point in our lives, the trap of image and status. I'm calling it trap because in many ways, that's exactly what it can feel like, something that catches us, holds us, and can even warp our sense of who we are if we're not careful. I initially thought of this podcast episode because I had heard someone that I know say that everything is about status back in the day. And that was so interesting to me that this poor girl was caught up in this sort of mindset because little does she know how thinking that way is going to impact her so negatively. Now, I know this topic might sound heavy or overdone, and if you've spent any time on social media, you've probably seen people tell you to reject external validation or not care about appearances, but here's the thing, it's really not that simple as telling yourself, all right, I'll stop caring about status. We are social creatures. We want to be appreciated. We want to feel like we're doing well in life. And sometimes that desire to be recognized or admired can push us to extremes or lock us into patterns of behavior that don't actually make us happy. So I don't want this to be the type of advice where I say, hey everyone, status is bad, just do you. Instead, let's dig into the nuances. We're going to be acknowledging that the need for validation is part of being human, but also explore why we can get stuck if we let ourselves be ruled by it. We're going to walk through some major points together, and hopefully by the end of this conversation, you'll feel more connected to yourself and less burdened by any external pressures. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for tuning in every Tuesday. And for those of you who have left a review, I sincerely appreciate the kind words. Anybody who's shared this podcast, you have no idea how much it means to me. And I would really appreciate if you guys continue to spread the love, because I know that these episodes really make a difference in people's lives. So I would love to spread the positivity, the more the merrier. But just wanted to thank you guys before we get into today's episode. So with that said, let's get started. I'm going to break this down into 5 sections, 5 major points that sum up how the trap of image and status can show up in our lives and how we might navigate it with more intention, self-compassion, and honesty. We're going to be covering the social mirror, the emotional toll, how to shift our focus from external to internal, and how to balance aspirations with authenticity and the need to redefine success and self-worth. I like to call our obsession with image and status the social mirror effect. Essentially, we look into other people's reactions, social media likes, job titles, the cars we drive, or the clothes we wear, and we use that reflection to decide how valuable or successful we are. It's like trying to get a sense of your face by staring into a funhouse mirror. It's always going to be distorted by some external factor. And I'd be lying if I said that stuff didn't matter as a content creator, because it does. There is a lot of strategy that goes into people liking a person's content. And sometimes that involves the clothes I wear, the things I do, or the aesthetic that I have. But the key thing here is I'm aware of it and I detach this part of my life from being the source of my happiness or self-worth. Instead, I focus on loving the process versus the result. So the process of creating, the process of filming, the process of brainstorming the art that I put out there. Versus if I focus on the end result too much, such as the content's performance, then I'd be doing only the things that I knew would go viral. Now let's take it back to when I was younger, think high school into early university. I used to crave academic validation. I wanted to be seen as smart or talented, so I would find myself studying in a way that was more about impressing people than actually learning. Mind you, I was a straight A student. I graduated high school with a 95% average, but I would get up at 5 a.m. to study or spend 15 hours at the library. And if I got a compliment like, wow, you're really bright, I would hold on to that like a lifeline. And if I didn't get that feedback, I'd feel like maybe I was less than everyone else. And I'm not sure if this came from a place where I felt like I was in such a competitive environment, but that was my reality. The crazy part is, even when I got the external affirmation, it never felt like enough. There was always a next level, someone who was better, or an accomplishment that felt just out of reach. If I got an A on a test, I think, yeah, but that was an easy class, or sure, but my friend got an A in a harder subject. It was seriously never ending. But what I learned from that period of my life is that chasing approval is like chasing the horizon. The more you move toward it, the more it moves away from you. Now, if you're in that place right now, now, whether it's with looks, social media validation, career validation, financial validation, whatever it is, I feel you. Let's not beat ourselves up too hard. Humans thrive in communities. Feeling liked or respected is part of how we navigate social groups. So it's not inherently wrong to value others' opinions. The issue, though, comes when we build our entire self-image on them, letting them dictate our moods and our self-worth. Have you ever posted something on social media, maybe something personal or creative, and then obsessively checked to see who liked it or how many views it got? That is a direct example of using a social mirror. We feel the need to see ourselves reflected back in the hearts, likes, or comments from others before we decide whether that post was good or whether we're okay that day. Now, I 100% check my stats all the time because, again, it is my job and I am so hyper aware of this that I have found ways to make sure that it is less about me as a person and more about the creative content that I share and how it's interpreted by people. That being said, I want to make an important distinction here. Recognizing we're part of a social ecosystem is different from identifying solely with how we appear within that ecosystem. In other words, it's okay to want to make an impact, to be recognized for your work or your craft, but it becomes a problem when you start living for that recognition, when your identity fuses with your follower count, your job title, or your brand. So the first big step in escaping this trap is just noticing it. Literally just notice that it's a problem and that you're guilty of it. Recognize that the pressure for image and status is real. It's powerful, and it often drives us more than we think. That recognition alone can be so transformative. I want to make it very clear that believing that everything is about status and acknowledging it does not mean you're recognizing it as an issue. You will reap the negative effects of thinking this way so long as you truly believe that life is all about status. And if that's the case, I can't change your mind. I'm only here to open your eyes to show you what life is all about so you can live a happier, more fulfilled life. All right, so once we recognize that we might be trapped or at least influenced heavily by external images of success, we need to talk about the emotional toll. Because let's be honest, this isn't just some abstract idea. It has real consequences for how we feel every single day. Anxiety loves to latch on to any area of uncertainty in our lives, and when you base your self-worth on external metrics, be it your salary, your looks, or people's opinions, there is a ton of uncertainty because you can't control how others perceive you. Sure, you can try to shape it with curated posts, perfect outfits, or witty comments, but at the end of the day, other people's reactions are outside of your control. This constant unpredictability often fuels a low-key or high-key sense of anxiety. So you might lie awake at night thinking, what if people didn't like that thing I posted? What if they're all talking about how I'm a fraud? What if I lose my job and then people see me as a failure? It's an endless loop of what ifs that can keep you in a state of restlessness. Another big emotional toll is burnout. I hate burnout. When you're always performing for others, trying to maintain an image of having everything together, it is exhausting. Imagine you're an actor on stage and the director never calls cut. You just keep going, scene after scene, line after line, without a break. That's what living purely for external validation can feel like. You might find yourself saying yes to extra responsibilities at work, not because you want them, but because you want the boss to notice how dedicated you are. Or you might overschedule your social life so you can appear popular and outgoing, even if you're an introvert who desperately needs alone time. It's a vicious cycle. You want to maintain the image, so you keep taking on more. But the more you take on, the more depleted you get. Eventually, your body or mind, or both, will push back, and that's when burnout hits. And I know this because when you start off as a content creator, you definitely care what people think, and it gets to you when people start to hate on you. But after a while, you get over this and you learn from it. And thank God I learned from it and I got over it, because if I were to continue caring what other people think, my goodness, I would be so exhausted every every day, and I would never know how to live for myself. So I love the fact that I don't care. And I know that people look at my posts and talk about me and probably say, it's so cringe what she's posting. Why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? But I don't care. I'm living for myself. I post what I want and I enjoy what I post. But let's be clear, burnout isn't just feeling tired. It can manifest as full-on disillusionment, where you don't even recognize what you want or why you're doing what you're doing anymore. Sometimes the harm is more subtle. If we constantly rely on external status markers, we start to quietly doubt our intrinsic abilities and worth. We might think, I'm only good enough because of my job title, or people only like me because of how I look. Over time, that will chip away at our sense of self, leading to a deeper layer of insecurity, which is never fun. Then, if any of those external markers get taken away, say you lose the job or go through a change in appearance, this shaky foundation crumbles, and that can be devastating. I've seen people go through a major identity crisis after losing a high-paying job. Suddenly, they have no idea who they are if they're not the successful one. Or another example is someone who suffers a health issue that changes their physique. They're going to struggle tremendously because so much of their confidence was tied to being the fit one. When you build your house on external pillars, you risk collapse the moment those pillars shift. So how do we unhook ourselves from the cycle? Because we can't just snap our fingers and stop caring about status. But we can gradually shift our focus from purely external validation to more internal markers of worth. Now, one of the most effective ways to do this is by identifying and living by your core values. These values are like an internal compass that helps you navigate the world regardless of who's clapping for you or what social media says. For me, some core values are authenticity, compassion, optimism, and responsibility. When I realized that, I started measuring my success not by what job title I had, but whether I was living in alignment with these values each day. So was I authentic in my interactions? Did I remain optimistic in my personal growth? Was I compassionate to the people around me and to myself? And if you ask any of my family members or friends, the first thing they'll probably say is that I'm very compassionate, which I've always stood by. Another step is setting internal goals rather than external ones. An internal goal might be something like, I want to learn a new skill because I'm excited about the process, or I want to exercise regularly because it makes me feel healthy and strong. These goals aren't about how they look to others. They're about how they make you feel and who they help you become. Compare that to external goals. Like, I want a six-pack because then people will see me as attractive, or I need a promotion so people will know I'm important. There's nothing wrong with wanting a promotion to look better. The question is why you want these things. If your why is mostly about external validation, that's a sign you might be stepping into the trap. Mindfulness isn't just about meditation or breathing exercises. It's about being aware of your motivations as you go through the day. So I want you to ask yourself questions like, why am I posting this photo? Why am I saying yes to this project? Why am I buying this particular item? If the answer is something like, because I genuinely want to share this moment, or because it aligns with my passion, that's a good sign. But if it's more along the lines of, well, I need people to think I'm doing well, or I don't want people to judge me, that's a clue that you're slipping into the external validation mindset. Changing your focus from external to internal isn't a one and done thing. It's a process, and it often involves small, consistent steps. You guys know how much I love breaking things down. So maybe start by giving yourself permission to do one thing a week that's purely for you with zero intention of sharing it on social media or bragging about it. It could be writing in your journal. It could be cooking a new recipe or taking a long walk to clear your head. The point is to reclaim some part of your life that's not performed for others. Over time, you might find yourself naturally leaning more into these intrinsically motivated actions, and that's when you start to realize how freeing it is not to be tied to everyone else's opinions. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that all external markers are evil, because it's natural and even healthy to have aspirations. Maybe you want a well-paying job, a certain lifestyle, or recognition in your field, and honestly, there's nothing inherently wrong with aiming high. The key, though, is to balance those aspirations with a sense of authenticity. But the tricky part is distinguishing between aspirations that genuinely excite you and those you only pursue because you think they'll impress people. Sometimes those motivations overlap, and that's okay. Maybe you want to be the best in your field and also enjoy the prestige that comes with it. The question to keep asking is, if nobody was around to witness this, would I still want to do it? If the answer is yes, if the pursuit itself lights you up, then it's likely an authentic desire. But if the answer is no, if you drop it immediately, if you weren't getting any claps or money, then you might be more driven by external rewards. Authenticity tends to resonate with people in a profound way. You might think that constantly curating your image to appear perfect is the way to go, but ironically, people connect more deeply with those who show their real selves. When someone is genuine, flaws become relatable, and their success feels more meaningful because they're not coated in a thick layer of performance. We've all seen influencers or public figures who project a super polished persona. Over time, they can feel distant, like an advertisement rather than a real person. But on the flip side, when someone shares a real struggle or acknowledges when they've messed up, we lean in because we see ourselves in them. That sense of recognition, like, hey, they're human too. It's incredibly powerful. I'm not here to tell you to delete all your social media, but I do think we can all learn to navigate it more authentically. Maybe that means you stop posting only the highlights of your life, or maybe you become more mindful about who you follow. Are they people who encourage you to be yourself, or accounts that constantly make you feel like you need to do more, buy more, or be more? Social media is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used in ways that either serve us or harm us. The goal is to consciously use it rather than letting it use us. But the unfortunate thing is, the majority of people let it use them. So don't be that person. Now, setting boundaries is also crucial. If you find yourself scrolling for hours, comparing your life to someone else's curated posts, maybe limit your screen time or remove certain apps from your phone for a bit. It can feel uncomfortable at first. You might experience FOMO or worry you'll miss important news, but in the long run, creating some space helps you reconnect with your own authentic path, free from the constant noise of what everyone else is doing or achieving. So we've talked about recognizing the problem, understanding the emotional toll, shifting our focus inward, and balancing aspirations with authenticity. But there's a deeper conversation here, which is about how we define success and self-worth, which I have mentioned in previous episodes, but let's dive into it again. Often we define success with a single metric: money, fame, or some sort of status. But life is multifaceted. If you base your entire sense of success on one dimension, you ignore the richness of everything else. For example, you could have a high-paying job, but zero time for friends, family, or personal interests. Is that truly success? Or you could be incredibly popular online, but struggle with depression in private. Does that feel truly like success? Real success is meaningful relationships, personal fulfillment, growth, contribution, health, and yes, financial security. When you expand your definition of success, you give yourself more ways to feel fulfilled rather than putting all your eggs in one precarious basket. So if you're ready to redefine how you measure self-worth, consider creating internal metrics that reflect your values and priorities. For instance, for learning and growth, ask yourself, did I learn something new or improve a skill this week? For your relationships, ask yourself, did I nurture my relationships in a meaningful way? For your well-being, ask yourself, did I take care of my mental and physical health? For your contribution, ask yourself, did I do something that made a difference in someone else's life, even if it was small? These metrics might not be as flashy as a shiny reward or a big promotion, but they often lead to a deeper, more stable sense of self-worth. And you'll notice that these internal metrics are largely within your control. You get to decide if you're investing in your growth, relationships, well-being, and contribution. And that autonomy can feel so incredibly empowering. Now, redefining success doesn't protect us from setbacks. You'll still have moments when you fail, get rejected, or feel embarrassed. But when your self-worth isn't solely dependent on external validation, you're less likely to spiral into self-doubt. You might still feel the sting of disappointment, but it won't define you. For example, if your main measure of worth is personal growth, then a failure is just another chance to learn. That doesn't mean failure is fun, but it can be reframed as part of the journey rather than the end of the road. Now, redefining success and self-worth is an ongoing practice, not a one-time switch. I'll say that again. It is an ongoing practice, not a one-time switch. There will be days you slip up into old patterns. Comparing yourself on social media, feeling bummed that you're not receiving as much praise as before, that's okay. Awareness is half the battle. Every time you notice yourself slipping, you have another opportunity to recalibrate, to step back and remember the bigger picture. Now, we've covered 5 major points today that may or may not be a lot to digest, so let's connect the dots and bring it together. So we start with the first step, which is noticing how often we look outside ourselves for a sense of validation and worth, maybe thinking, yeah, I spend a lot of energy worrying about what people think. Then we realize the emotional cost, anxiety, burnout, and erosion of self-confidence. It's not just a harmless habit, it has real consequences for our mental well-being. Next, we shift to internal motivations, identifying values and goals that come from within. This doesn't happen overnight, but gradually we start to filter our actions through the lens of, is this true to me, instead of will this get me more likes or applause? Then we also work on balancing our aspirations. It's not like we have to let go of wanting success, but we aim to make sure that success aligns with who we actually are, not just who we think we should be. And finally, we redefine what it means to be successful and worthy in our own eyes, focusing on the multifaceted, deeper elements of life rather than a single fleeting metric. Before I wrap up, I want to offer a few practical exercises or reflections you can try. Again, this isn't about quick fixes, but about cultivating a new mindset over time. At the start or end of each day, pick one action you took that day. Maybe it was posting on social media or volunteering for an extra project or even choosing a particular outfit, and ask yourself, why did I really do that? And try to be honest without judgment. If you did it to impress someone, just note it. Over time, you might start noticing patterns in your motivation. Another thing you can do is set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes and freely write about what success looks and feels like to you at this stage in your life. Don't think about your parents or friends or coworkers and what they would say or think. Focus on your own inner sense, and you might surprise yourself with what comes out once you detach from external expectations. Another thing you can do is, instead of listing places you want to travel or items you want to buy, create a bucket list that aligns with your core values. For example, if one of your values is community, maybe you include start a podcast on your list. If your value is adventure, you might write try hiking. These items reflect what lights you up rather than what looks good on Instagram. Another thing you can do is, if social media is your weakness, experiment with some digital boundaries. Maybe that's setting a 30-minute daily limit on a certain app or taking Sunday off from all digital platforms. Notice how it feels. Relieving, or do you feel anxious and disconnected? Use that information to shape a healthier relationship with your online presence. And the last thing you can try is, once a week, visualize yourself living a life guided by internal values. Picture how you'd spend your day, how you'd interact with people, the kind of projects or hobbies you'd engage in. This can be a powerful way to reprogram your mind to seek internal satisfaction rather than external applause. I'd love to tell you that once you start valuing your authentic self, everything becomes sunshine and rainbows, but let's be real, that's really not how life works. And there will be days when you'll get caught up again in what other people think, as I do too. So maybe you'll slip up into old habits, comparing salaries, bodies, or follower counts. Maybe you'll make a decision you regret later because you were momentarily blinded by the lure of status. And I'm here to tell you that's normal. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to grow in awareness so that each time you slip, you bounce back a little faster. You recognize, oh, I'm doing that thing again, caring too much about what other people think, and you return to your center core values. Over time, you'll find that these slips happen less often, and when they do happen, you're more forgiving of yourself. A huge part of escaping the trap of image and status is learning to hold compassion for yourself, because it's not about harshly judging yourself for wanting wanting approval. Wanting to be liked or admired is a fundamental human emotion. Instead, it's about gently guiding yourself back to a place of balance when that desire becomes destructive. It's also really important to embrace what makes you unique. If we were all the same, life would be incredibly dull. Yet, in the pursuit of status, we sometimes force ourselves into molds that don't really fit. We might take on careers we hate just because they sound impressive, or we might change our personalities to fit in, but true self-respect and self-confidence grow when you learn to appreciate your quirks, your natural gifts, and even your limitations. Now, I feel like in the Positive Proof community, we're all friends here, right? So let me give it to you straight. You are more than any label, more than your job title, your Instagram feed, your net worth, or your popularity. You have a depth that can't be fully captured by how many people applaud you. Sure, it feels good to be recognized because we're human. We enjoy that dopamine rush, but recognition is like dessert, tasty and satisfying in the moment, but it's not what truly nourishes you day in and day out. Real nourishment comes from living in alignment with who you truly are, day after day, in the quiet decisions and small acts that might not make headlines or generate likes, but make you feel alive and grounded. It's in the relationships where you can be honest about your fears and hopes. It's in the passions you pursue just because they light you up. It's in the kindness you extend to strangers. When you live from that place, the trap of image and status starts to lose its grip. You begin to see that your worth was never actually on the line because it's intrinsic, it's built in. That's not a cliche, it's a lifelong truth that many of us forget in the hustle of daily life. So I hope you walk away feeling a little freer, a little lighter, and maybe even a bit braver about being who you are without an apology. Remember, this is a practice, and it's not about turning off social media or quitting your job or retreating from the world. It's about engaging with the world on your own terms, knowing your own values, and being mindful of the moments when you start to slip into seeking external approval. We can't avoid the trap altogether. It's ingrained in our society, but we can learn how to step around it more gracefully, choosing authenticity and self-compassion over empty applause. That, in my view, is a life worth living. If you found any part of this episode helpful, I encourage you to share it with someone who might be grappling with these issues too, and let me know your thoughts or any strategies you've discovered along the way for dealing with the trap of image and status. But that is a wrap. I do hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please leave a review. Your feedback means so much to me. And the more people this podcast reaches, the bigger the positive impact we make. So I would love it if you could do that for me. Also, if you guys have any recommendations as to what you'd like me to record in future episodes, definitely let me know because I'm open to recording what you guys want to hear. And if you don't know yet, I do monthly giveaways where a random person will be selected from those of you who did leave a review. The written reviews can be done over on Apple Podcasts and the ratings can be done on Spotify. Just send me a screenshot once you've done so and you'll be eligible to win. The winner will be announced on Instagram at Positive Proof Podcast. And if you want an extra entry into the giveaway, make sure to share this podcast or episode via socials and tag me at Parmis and again at Positive Proof Podcast on Instagram. To everyone else, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you so much and I can't wait to chat with you again in next week's episode. Lots of love, Parmis.